You see on the screen there, I'm Fernando Molina. I'm a CFI double I here in Las Vegas. I teach at Desert Flying Club, which is at Boulder City. Also a fast team member, safety rep for our club. So always a fan of passing on anything I can to help with safety. And for a number of years, I've actually been helping Jason Miller, who has a channel on YouTube as well as some social media called Learn the Finer Points, and have also helped with his ground school. So just a couple of side gigs I'm doing. I have some new activities on the horizon, but I'll let those play out as time goes on. The title was actually, this is this presentation I gave at Oshkosh. Thanks to Jason Miller. He set this up and it actually, thankfully, got some pretty good feedback. And so hopefully we'll pass it on to you guys. All right, that's me. It looks pretty out there, but it's not. That's Afghanistan. But just you can see a previous life. I actually have about 2,500 hours in the back seat for that Strike Eagle. This is me, so you can see that I was actually in an airplane at one point in time. And then one more, just so you can see it wasn't AI. Anyway, just throwing those down there. So it's kind of my past background, along with the, since 2012 CFI and double I time. I've always enjoyed teaching. And since I got connected with Jason Miller, one of the things that he does is these adventure camps. Not trying to sell them to you all, but just to, as a pitch to just go out and seek new skills, new adventures in your flying, as opposed to, well, it's not bad to be conservative and do, straight and level and regular cross countries and all that kind of stuff. But as a manner of building your skill, just seeking out other opportunities and other experiences, because every time you do, ideally, you're practicing your risk management, you're practicing your decision-making skills, your ADM, and your flying skills. So these are the 4 camps that we're going on this year. One of them actually happening this weekend, Baja, California. Mountains of California are between the mountain passes between Lake Tahoe and Mammoth. So there's some skill building in there, learning high density altitude, learning things like a canyon turn in a canyon, and so on and so forth. Canyons of the Southwest is actually where this happened last year in 2024. But Canyons of the Southwest is basically throughout Utah. We fly over the Grand Canyon, kind of brief how SFRAs work, in this one in particular, and then fly around Monument Valley, Lake Powell, a lot of really beautiful terrain, but also respectful of what canyon flying looks like and the risks associated. And then there's a Idaho backcountry flight that we added this year in August. So the interesting thing about these is that parts of what we teach is it's fun to go out and do unusual things like flying in the mountains, flying in the canyons, but there's also added risk. And there's risk in all flying. Obviously, we have a risk management for a reason. But when you add risk, then the questions are, how do you assess that, mitigate it, or avoid it, or accept it, right? But you have to have a strategy to at least acknowledge what the risks are. And in these cases, what would happen if something went wrong? What would happen if you had to walk out of the area, desolate area that you're flying cross country over, things like that. And then a little bit of survival, a little bit of having equipment, things like that. And that's what we're learning. This was how the camp is for Monument Valley. You can see Monument Valley Airport, not a very long runway. I want to say it's 3,000 feet by like 45. And you can see we had like 16 airplanes last year. This year was down to 9, but no biggie. It's always fun to be rooting around. You can see one of the monuments out there where, you fly around those. It's good to see how majestic they are up close, and being able to fly below their tops. This is Joe Creasy, the protagonist in this story. We got to fly the whole weekend together, and that's kind of relevant. So just kind of pointing it out there in how our crew coordination happened when we had our incident. This is an example of the flying we're doing. Again, you can see the terrain's beautiful, but also where would you go if something happened right now? So it's kind of a thought to hopefully put into people's brains if you haven't thought about it before. You all are flying around Arizona in this chapter of EAA. So I know you guys fly over some beautiful terrain, awesome areas, and some desolate areas as well. There's some more, obviously beautiful. Also, you can look, and in this case, whoop, let me go back there. You'd see that, it's tough to find a place to land in just this picture unless you're studying it. Here's some of our flying. Again, added risks, but if you brief it, you can brief low altitude, you can brief low altitude formation. You could do all those things, but you have to make sure you're doing it safely and you're assessing the risks while we're doing it. So here's you see the canyon wall up there on the left. There's actually another canyon to our left wall, and there's one actually behind us that we had to turn base just inside of. This is an airfield called Height. It's a happy Joe. And then one last activity so you can see the experience that we're getting is flying through these valley walls. So making a decision to fly through stuff like that or flying to a small runway that's in a canyon, flying through to canyon walls, and some of the other training you're just seeing videos of, those are all things that we just get to practice. Go around. And when we're doing canyon turns, what I'll typically do is we'll go into a really wide canyon that's maybe a mile to 3 miles wide. They go in there and we'll see what the turn radius is of the airplane, either at speed or when we minimize ourselves to maybe like a 1.3 VSO, and trying to do practice what are called canyon turns. We can read up about that another time, but seeing what a mid radius turn looks like, especially if your life depends on it, and being in a canyon when we're actually practicing this usually, drives the point home. You can see right here what a typical route looks like throughout a day. In this case, we started at Monument Valley in the far south. We went we went counterclockwise and went all the way up there to point number 4 up there, Green River Airport. Had lunch, stopped for a little bit, and then came on back down. And you can see the green line, which was our track for the second part of the day. So that's the canyon flying. Like, not trying to sell the camp to you, but you can see that like doing a dedicated skill course can definitely benefit. And in this case, part of the story, this happened to be what me and Joe were doing for a whole weekend together. And he was already a pretty experienced 182 pilot. So I was kind of happy and privileged to be able to fly with him as a CFI. So end of the weekend, we decided we're going to go home. Nice simple flight, UT 25 right there on the border of Utah and Arizona. You can see as a reference Lake Powell, that's Page, Arizona airfield. We're going to pass by that. The blue hash mark area is the Grand Canyon, if you don't recognize that or haven't been there before. Although for a lot of y'all, I suppose plenty of you have probably been. And then we're just going to Henderson Airport on the south side of Las Vegas. Nice, easy flight. Looks like 247 miles, 2 hours, 15 minutes. Piece of cake on the way home. That's not what happened. So let's take you to my track log from that day. You can see it doesn't exactly match the flight plan that we were doing that we're talking about. So here we are. I'm going to take you through the flight. If anybody has any questions, I don't see any up yet on the chat, but feel free. We're going to go like 5 times, and then I'll just scroll through. Take off out of Monument Valley. We're going to climb. We decide we're going to be about 8,500. That'll take us all the way home. In a couple areas, we'll be kind of low, like 1,500 to 2,500 AGL. But no big deal. There's sparsely, actually, it's non-populated area pretty much, and you can see the kind of terrain we were flying over. So we're cruising. We're up at about 8.4. I'm going to tell you all what altitudes we were at. But just as a reference, we were You can notice the GPS is a little off sometimes when we're going here. So we get to 8,500. There we go. You can see we went up a little bit higher and then back down below. And right around here, and a couple of times so far through this part of the flight, climbing up, we're trying to hop on Denver Center, Tuba City, 12755. And we're trying to talk to him and trying to get some flight following. But we're out here in a desolate kind of area and cruising out. And one of the things that happened is we have a GI-275 engine monitor, digital engine monitor, and a couple of times the oil pressure had hiccuped. And we're like, huh. I look at him, and I always had a theory when I was back in the military, and like if I'm thinking something and I look over and somebody says something, either he's thinking it and I say it, or I say thinking it and he says it. That's like confirmation. Like you don't have to say it again. It's just like, oh yeah, we're both thinking the same thing. And that goes for a lot of different situations. In this case, I was like, you see that? He's like, yep. And we're like, huh, well, let's keep an eye on that. And what we started doing is we're like, well, is it an errant sensor? It had hiccup maybe once or twice all weekend long. And we were riding the airplane pretty hard. Like we were in those canyons, we were, using our auto power to climb in and out and do our maneuvering. And so we're like, huh. And then it takes about a second, well, I don't know, 30 seconds or so. And Joe's like, looks at me and he's like, maybe we should climb 10.5. And I looked at him, I just, big smile on my face, like, yep, that's a really good idea. So here we go down our path. But so far, like it had hiccuped and stopped. So we're going with not a big deal. We're going to go through, maybe it's a sensor. Now, if you think about cognitive dissonance and what's the where you talk yourself into a theory, basically. And I'm screwing up the name of it right now, but where we're just like, oh, we're probably fine. It's not a big deal, and we just basically talk ourselves into that, and we keep going. So now it's important to note, right? I think already some folks, especially CFIs, or maybe even people who are just pretty experienced private pilots already, depending on whatever your experiences are like, huh, might start thinking about going around or turning around, or maybe start thinking already of where's a safe place to land if I need to, especially if you have some kind of a oil or fuel looking type problem that can affect the further action of your engine. Well, we're happy to go. All right, we're pressing forward. Page, Arizona is about 25 miles in front of us. And by now we're more than 25 miles to Monument Valley. So we looked at that. I remember actually taking that assessment and going, all right, well, we're closer to Page than we are to Monument Valley. So let's just, we'll try to, if something else goes on, we'll try to go to Page. So here, let's keep going. Notice how we're actually over a semi-decent flat spot now, but not a big deal because I'm not thinking about it. And you notice we're also in our climb by now. I mentioned that we talked about going to 10.5. So we start going up. And it actually equalizes, possibly because we're at full power. Throttle's all the way in. And so we start to equalize, goes back up. It's staying in the green generally. And then we get up just to 10.5. It's not going to register. We're at the top though. You can see we're at the top here. And actually just about now is where we started. Go back. Yeah, it looks like the GPS on here in the track file going to show 10.1. So we get up to there, and all of a sudden, poo. It starts to sputter, and next thing you know, the engine starts going down and turning to about 1,200 to 1,500 RPM. So we're like, oh, that's not good. So let's make it to Page. So that's our first initial thing. And I told you guys, I tried to hop on the radio. I tried to ask for flight following a couple times. And at this point, I get on the radio and I start barking. And I'm like, emergency, November 3444 Romeo. We have a partial power loss, 2 souls on board, and we got about 3 hours of gas. And I just spit it all out. Very first lesson learned is you spit it all out. And if it's a cold call, then they're going to need you to make another call. I mean, it's just going to happen. And we know this, and I've taught it before a bunch of times, but that's exactly what happened. He comes back. He's like, 3444 Romeo, what do you say? Say nature emergency. So like, I already told him all this. I'm going, but I didn't get annoyed. It just was a classic. I was like, oh, duh, of course, cold call. He's not going to be able to do all that kind of stuff. But it was great. We got two-way communication. And it turns out I was able to debrief with that controller. And it's really cool. So at this point, I can mention that sometimes we go flying and we're like, gosh, why isn't the controller talking to me? Why aren't they answering? Why is that? And he let us know already that so far throughout that part of the flight, they heard bits and pieces. They heard like every other word sometimes. They heard bits and pieces of sentences, but they never heard a complete transmission and not enough to go ahead and answer. So they were just waiting until hopefully we got to a place where we were closer to one of their transmitter and receivers. Um, or, maybe we were going to drift into the next sector. But they heard us. And so it was kind of interesting that, he had that perspective. He was able to share it with us. And I just kind of felt like a dummy because a couple of times I was like, oh man, Denver Center doesn't want to be flight following today. But when we're up at 10.5 and I said emergency, they were on the radio immediately. So that was pretty cool. And he was saying that like he was so relieved when they heard us and they saw that we actually needed help and they were able to help us. So that was pretty cool. And a good, I'll chalk it up to a good part for assistance for air traffic control. So now we go through a couple of radio calls. How many souls on board, gas, what are your intentions? And we get to the what are your intentions part. And I say, we're going to try to make page. And as soon as I finish that, Joe looks at me and actually he gets on the radio and he's like, we're not going to page. He had been assessing the performance and he had been seeing what we were doing. He's trying to do what he could with the airplane. And we weren't going to get there. And he could tell by there because we were 22 miles now from page. Now, another piece, which by the way, as soon as it started sputtering, Joe looks at me, he's like, all right, let's do the checklist. I'm like, yep, I'm right on it. So I'm pulling it out. And he's like, what's your best glide? 77. And from that point forward, Joe is flying this airplane, which was really awesome. So as a CFI, it's like pretty comforting to know that you're flying with somebody who you can trust with flying. And oh, by the way, we had just been flying all of that can flying together for a whole weekend. So I think he knew me and I knew him pretty well at this point when we're starting to go through this experience. So he's nailing it and we're going down at that point at about a 500 foot per minute descent. And when he said that though, we looked and I kind of had a like V8 smack my head again moment. And I'm thinking, man, partial power loss. Like I thought we could be able to make it, but obviously we're not gonna. It's time to pick a place to land. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom a little bit to what we're looking at in front of us and look at it right where I'm at, like probably just a little bit further down here, like right about there. And so I can do this in hindsight and kind of kick myself a little bit because there's a technique that we like to teach. It's called swinging from a vine for your diverts. So if you think you're going to have a problem, like where would I land if I lost engine power? Where would I land if I lost engine power now? What about now? And what you do is you hang on to the last one. You hang on to that vine like a monkey does until you get your next vine. And you don't let go. Don't let go of that last vine until you get the next vine. So it's a little technique. I stole it from Jason, but it's a pretty good technique. And I have actually taught it a bunch of times. But here we are, we're staring out here, and from our altitude looking out, we're probably really closer to about here because the last piece of flat terrain is right about when we make this turn, and it's to the side. And so guess what I don't look at? And so we look and we find this, you can barely see it right now, but you're going to see it in a second. This mesa off our nose at the edge of that north-south running ridgeline. And you can see the blue track is actually pointing towards it. So just lesson learned now too, right? A suitable landing spot behind you is useless if you didn't make note of it and you're not paying attention. So, in this case, this is what we're staring at. And it's really, really inhospitable terrain and the flat areas behind us. Thinking through maybe doing a 90-degree turn or not to see if there's stuff behind you is a great technique. It's also a gut check. And it just turns out we didn't do that. So moving on from there. All right, so here we're cruising. You can see we're going through that very rocky terrain, going, no one land anywhere around here. And then you can see that we're pointing towards what turns out, if I stop right here, to be probably one of the most, there's a finger off. Hopefully you guys see my mouse, kind of an edge over here, this finger here, and there's one other one that we would have had to do some maneuvering to try to get on that one. So this just happened to be the spot to land within this area. And I'll play it through. I'll go down to like 3 and let you guys watch the landing. Couple fun facts you're going to see in a little while. This edge was definitely on my mind. I was watching it and Joe was like, I'm glad you said something because I didn't see it. And as we're cruising in there, we're actually kind of pointed right at it. So we're also very keen on, boy, I hope we make the Mesa. I hope we make the Mesa. The good news is we actually had a handful of things working for us. The propeller was still spinning, and it was spinning around, well, again, between 12 and 1500 RPM. And that's actually good. For folks who've done multi-engine training, there's actually like a zero thrust type. And without oil, which is what happened to our engine, we wouldn't have been able to change the pitch of the variable speed propeller anyway, constant speed propeller. So that was actually working for us. We were gliding and we were using our aim points and looking at this Mesa, and it wasn't moving enough that we're thinking about changing our plan. And so we actually had a little bit of excess energy, and we touched down about 500 feet into the Mesa. What else was going on? We had that. Now, lastly, important question always pops up. Did you do a forced landing checklist? No. Bad technique. Absolutely bad technique. Because at the end of any kind of a forced landing, you always have the possibility of your doors getting stuck or some part of your airframe getting deformed a little bit so you can't open your doors. And the second important hazard you have is fire. And so unfortunately, we didn't secure the motor before we landed, and we didn't secure the fuel, and we didn't open the doors, which is absolutely what I would have done or recommend as part of your technique if you're doing forced landing. It's actually in most POHs. So that's what we do. But as it turns out, we are able to make this landing. Right about now, we're pointing at that edge I was telling you about on the left, and I bark at him. I was like, go to the right, go to the right. And so he kicks in, little aileron, some rudder, and we actually end up closer to the middle. And there's the landing. All right. Let's hop off the 4-foot. Let me take a pause, see if there's any questions. Not yet.
I have
either. Oh, good.
Okay, my question is, and it was visible on the earlier in what you were showing us. I guess you just didn't check for nearby airports like Navajo Mountain?
Navajo Mountain is really not a good airport. It's literally like a dirt strip there on the base of Navajo Mountain. But you're right. I was not thinking about Navajo Mountain being up there to the north. And also, when we were abeam Navajo Mountain by about 15 miles, well, maybe 10, it was not in my brain that we were thinking that we were going to have to do airport landing. So that's part of the important lesson I have for everybody is hopefully I would have been tracking any suitable landing spot, the real suitable landing spot of that area. And we did the Canyon trip just last month or end of September this year. And so all of us know about this landing from last year. In fact, I did this talk to the camp before we started. And all of us were flying over that mesa. We were flying over that area. There's lots of suitable landing spots that we flew over and didn't get over there. But honestly, if there was an issue, I probably would not have gone over to Navajo. It's not really a good prepared surface, but there was lots of roads just right below us at that time.
So you would contend that where you landed was better than the Navajo Mountain Strip?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
At the moment we were passing Navajo, it was not anywhere in my brain. I guess that's the simplest way for everything I just explained. But more suitable than Navajo Mountain would have been the roads that were right below us in that flat area that we flew over. Anybody else? That's a good question, though. I don't know if you've been to Navajo Mountain, but it's like I flew over to look at it and survey it, and it's not very well prepared and taken care of. But in a heartbeat, absolutely would have been an option. Another question that people ask me is, do we use glide rings? And glide rings are awesome in ForeFlight. It's a great thing when you have noticeable types of geographic references you can land on. But when you're in the middle of a desolate area, it just shows you if you're close to a road. So at that time, I wasn't thinking glide ring at all. Although, near, I don't know, in a part of a city where there's, 4 to 5 to 6 airfields that are within 5, 6, 10 miles of each other, it's a great idea to see if you can actually make a field. And so absolutely preach that it's a good idea to use it, but also know when it's not useful for you. So here we go. This is Molina Mesa. You can kind of see where we're at. Nice, looks pretty almost. It's kind of semi hard packed dirt. You can see little rocks that we had rolled over and stuff, and a couple little bushes that we might have run into and taken out. That's the airplane. You can see we actually landed, decent landing. To your point on Navajo Mesa, while it's not a runway I would normally pick in an emergency, no problem. We weren't that close to it, but it would be easy to get onto, and you could see that your spring steel gear on your average GA airplane can actually land on a unapproved surface at least decently. But airplane's intact. We have the front of the airplane. You can see there's actually not even a prop strike, and Joe Creasy's luggage, because he landed. And here's a thought towards dress to egress. If you think about what would happen if I had to walk out of this area that I'm flying over, he was in a pair of Hey Dudes sandals, and we landed and we got out. He's like, gets his feet, start to get stuck in the dirt, and so he pulled his luggage out and actually pulls his hiking boots. That's what happened to our right gear. That's the fairing around the spring steel gear, and what happened is it hits a bush that I'll show you in just a second. That's the nose gear. And actually that is the only indication of oil that we had in the entire motor. I took out the cowling. We looked all around the inside. We looked around for cracks or any issues, unless there was a crack at the bottom that I couldn't see, which is a very possible thing. Although I would have expected some kind of a spray, but really the only oil was on that tire. And you can see the whole tire isn't just soaked in it. Another likely thing is maybe some oil got pushed out of a leaky piston out the exhaust. But in the end, we don't know exactly what happened, just the fact that there was no oil in the motor when we landed. There's the bush that we hit. You can see it's kind of taken out. And then the only other piece of damage, which is this little bend to the elevator on the back. So that's it. Right side gear, flat nose tire, no oil in the engine, and then a bend in the elevator. And the airplane theoretically could have been fixed and flyable. So that's how we ended up. I would laugh at this part, but thanks to FlightAware, it told us that our flight was complete, which I was like, awesome, thanks. 23 minutes in duration. Now this is the actual flight, and I just showed you guys the whole deal. We got to name the Mesa. I did. I figured why not. So it's a waypoint on my ForeFlight now, since I got to land there. And yeah, you can see kind of the area we went to, and south of Navajo Mountain. Oh, let me go back. Sorry about that. South of Navajo Mountain. You know what? Well, I'm not going to do it right now, but that is about, yeah, we were probably 10 miles south of Navajo, is what it looks like. Maybe 7. But good point. And actually, I've had somebody mention Navajo to me before. So we did that. You can see the airplane. But what do we do after we land? Let's see. First, let me go back. All right, so that's me. You can see I was actually with this airplane. There's Joe, pretty happy, and you can see the cowling off there. I'm actually sitting there and I'm trying to do communication. So, you land, and I was like, huh. Well, first thing is we look at each other, and it's kind of a dusty, more than smoky, I should say, is how I describe it. And look at each other, and like, we should shut the engine off. Way too late to have that revelation, but you okay? Yeah, you okay? And that's kind of, we're just like, holy shit, we just did that. Excuse my language. Um, and he had a scratch on his left elbow. Other than that, we're like, let's get out of here. And we get out and start checking out the airplane and start checking out our surroundings, and slowly but surely started policing up what's going on. Well, I had a Garmin InReach Messenger, a little puck kind. I'll show you a picture of it. And I hit the SOS button on it, and then I decided to take a drink of water and sit there. And about 5 minutes later, I actually get a call from Garmin, and I was like, "Huh, I guess I have cell phone signal." So they call me, and they're like, "Hey, do you have a Garmin InReach?" And I was like, "Yes." He goes, "Well, we just got an emergency beacon from you. Are you guys all right?" And, and I was like, "Well, let me tell you a story." And let them know where we're at, what our condition is. One of the other things of benefits of being on with air traffic control is before we landed, I was able to plot our location because I pulled out for flight. Joe was doing a good job of flying. We were agreeing on where our landing spot was. Crew coordination wise, like we were kind of gelling pretty good and agreeing on what we were going to do and how it was going. And so I was able to get with air traffic control and be like, all right, about to lose you guys on the radio. We are on a 085 radial, 22.1 miles from Page, Arizona. And I was able to just pull that up on the drawing tool on ForeFlight. And it was just cool to have the benefit of, if you were flying by yourself and had to do this, you'd be a handful of airplane just making it happen. So I'm thankful, we had two of us. He was able to fly. I was able to do the coordination. And between that and then Garmin, like by the time we landed, there was already lots of information about where we were. And that's pretty good. We teach with the flying camps that if they know where you're at, without excess signaling, that you probably can get picked up within around 24 hours, but you're likely to spend the night somewhere. If they don't know where you're at, but they have a good idea, then there's a good chance it turns to 72 hours. And if they don't know where you're at, it easily could get worse than that if they don't even have an indication.
Fernando,
Yes.
I have a question. So did you have an ELT and was it turned on?
Yes, we had the ELT. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. But yes, it was turned on, and yes, it went off as soon as we landed. And it's really loud. If you haven't had one go off in front of you and just keep on going, it's really loud. I'm going to get to that in just a second. So any more to the question on ELT out of curiosity?
I just wondered about whether that was useful.
Yeah, we had it. It was a 406 ELT, which is good. Lots we could talk about 121 versus 406. Absolutely should have the 406 by now if you don't, or if you know of any rental or anything like that. Like it'd almost be a must-have. So back to Garmin, right? So Garmin's talking to me, and they stayed on with me, the Garmin emergency services. If need be, they would go to the Survival Recovery Center, and they had the contact to do that. What they did is they just stayed on with me until I got on with 911 for the local area. So we got on with Northern Arizona, because Page right there is on the border, and whatever county that was. And so we got to talk to them, give us our condition and all that kind of stuff. And that's important because one of the most important things about survival and survival rescue services is they will not move any logistics or any activity until they can verify your condition and verify your location. And when I say verify location, like there has to be a third party that has actually like made contact with you and knows where you are so they can get pointed to it. In today's age, a PLB, personal locator beacon of some type, goes a long way to contributing to that. And there's been a significant change in the length that it takes to get recovered. But that's not the golden rule. Like I wouldn't say that changes the rule that you can expect to spend the night if forces are not able to mobilize and go get you in a case like you're on a mesa 20 miles away from civilization, and there is no way to hike up and find you. But between air traffic control, between Garmin services, and they call out, the other thing that happens is air traffic control gets on the radio and they start calling out to folks in the area saying, hey, can anyone help with a down pilot or with a down, finding a possible down aircraft? One of the aircraft from our camp actually was at Page getting gas. So the folks going west were all going to Page, getting gas, and then moving on. The folks going east, obviously, were doing different stuff. And he had just taken off. He was outbound on the CTAF, and then when he changes over to Denver Center, they actually heard the chatter. And Denver Center was trying to like talk a PC-12 into coming over to look over, find our location. And they're like, well, we got to talk to our customers first and get a permission. So they're like, hey, we got it, we can go. And they had a suspicion there might be somebody from the camp, another flyer from the camp, but they didn't know for sure from the call sign. But they turned around now in a totally awesome, we'll call it, I always call it a graduate level move. He actually gets on the FlightAware, passes over Page when he has signal, downloads the FlightAware ADS-B track, and actually loads it to his Google Maps, his Google Earth. And then now he has a track, I'm gonna go straight to that real quick, that points to where we were on his iPad. So they come tracking over eastbound. And this is first contact. So his first pass, he gets to fly right over us. And he's able to basically right away verify our stuff. Now, an interesting thing there is just getting passed over as an airplane doesn't complete or finding out what your condition is. Again, Garmin's working on one side. We have already on our side talked to 911, but air traffic control doesn't know that. And as far as anybody who would coordinate with the Survival Recovery Center, they wouldn't know that either. What he had to do is after that video, he had to go back after they passed, and he was going to turn around and come on back. And he had to zoom in and see that we were actually underneath the wing when we were flying over. Here's another view of the mesa. There's that edge I told you about that it slowly drops off here on the side. We were pointing towards that, and then it drops off pretty steeply after that. So kind of thankful we missed all that. We ended up more in the middle. Do the next pass. See it's under the wing. Whoop. All right,
ladies and gentlemen, Joe Creasy.
All right, so one of the concepts we have is how do you get found and stay found? Describing all that kind of stuff. We were pretty fortunate. We had a lot of time with each other. We had a lot of good experience, and we were able to execute what I would consider a pretty decent CRM on the descent. With the exception of, we should have figured that we could have probably turned around and maybe we would have found a better landing spot. But from what we saw out in front of us, we made the decision for what was the most suitable landing spot, and that's what we did. What's important though is if you make an off-airport landing successfully, ideally it's because you've got good training, you're using your discipline, and you've actually done enough things right to not run out of Swiss cheese, right? So this is one example of what we teach for the camp. This is actually the old SRU 21P. This is what, in fact, I wore when I first started flying in the Air Force. And then it's kind of gone on to little heftier vests that go on and go there. But this vest, if you can find it out there, is pretty cool because you can just sew things onto it. At our camp, there's a guy named Eric Cope. He was an Army helicopter pilot. And he suggests stuff like, sewing your knife to it, sewing other, and building up your own little first aid kit and signaling kit that can fit in the vest. This happened to be what I was wearing. So you can see there's a little bit of room in there. My caution to commercial vests like this, fishing vests tend to have pockets and things that you can put stuff in, is having it become too bulky. And that's a good example in the picture of how it can be too bulky where it's a little difficult to use the yoke or stick or whatever it is you're flying with. However, if you pack it right, you put the right stuff in it, it could be very useful. The saying we have for survival equipment is if whatever's on you is survival equipment, because you might have to jump out of that airplane and you might have a fire hazard or some other issue where you have to run away from the airplane quick. Whatever's in the back, I'm sure some of y'all, at least one of you, I'm sure, has some type of cool like bag that's got a whole bunch of gear and has, camping equipment, things like that. Well, that's what it is. If it's in the back of your airplane, it's camping gear. And what you want is you want to have the right mix of things that are over you, suitable to the area you're flying over, that are on you, excuse me, as well as the other gear in the back that, assuming you make a suitable landing, you'll be able to access and, make yourself more comfortable if you have to spend the night in the woods or some other area. I had a handheld radio. So this is where we get into the ELT. Had a handheld radio. I happened to pick the PJ2 because I knew I could put my headset in it. And, even if I was flying with my wife or another passenger, I could, teach them that you just put your headset in and you can try to call somebody. But I brought it out. It was actually in my vest, so it was right on me. Pulled it out after my inReach messenger. Went to emergency channel, and guess what I heard? I'll wait and see if anybody says something or raise their hand. What's that?
The ELT.
That's
Right.
sound.
Yeah, sometimes I get silence when I ask this question, but it was a wee, 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 wee. It was the most annoying thing in the world at that moment. And so, what did I do about that? Any ideas?
Shut it off.
Yeah, I shut it off and I threw it back in the seat, and I was like, "Well, this sucks. I can't use this right now," which is the stupidest thing to do. But it was just at that moment, I'm like, I'm looking at my radio, going, "How am I going to use this? I don't want to turn off ELT until I know somebody has found us." And at this moment, I haven't. So I wouldn't tell anybody to turn off your ELT, but if you need to, recognize that you can turn off your ELT and turn it back on, and then use your radio. What's more important that you could do with something like a radio is to know your equipment and do a couple other things, like try to use, if you happen to know what they are, the auxiliary air-to-air frequencies, because there's a handful of air-to-air frequencies. Now, we've gotten into debates over this. I don't want to debate the fact that we did it, the fact that we didn't. That's good, right, wrong, and different. We happen to be using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So fingers is what people call it. It is heavily used, although if you look in the AIM, it actually suggests not using it. But it happens to be what we were using. I knew that. We were using it all weekend long. That would have been a simple thing to come up on a radio. And when my friend flew over us, I could have been on the radio talking to him. But instead, he has to zoom in on his video to see if we were actually under the wing. The second thing I could do is get on the frequency that I was just on. I can tell you now, because it's embedded in my brain, Tuba City, Denver Center, 12755. That was the frequency I was just on. And whatever frequency you were just on, I promise you, if you had communicated with air traffic control, or if your ELT is going off, people are looking for you. And they're on that center frequency in that area, and they're looking for you, or at least trying to hear if anybody's going to try to come up. So you will, knock on wood, have somebody relay if you're sending a signal. And we all know that airline pilots, that's one of their SOPs, is that they're always monitoring guard. So a couple of things that I absolutely could have done that I didn't do until later, much later. All right, so there's my inReach messenger. There's an inReach Mini, which looks like a little more like a little small walkie-talkie. Great device, subscription-based service. It's pretty cool. And you can see that you have a commercial service that'll sit there and they'll actually try to call you or your contacts. They actually did call my contacts, so make sure you have that updated, because they called my wife, which at first was very alarming. But the good news is they kept her updated on our status throughout the ordeal. So that was actually comforting at the end. The other thing is the way these messengers work, the messenger-based PLBs, is that they work usually with an app on your phone. So I do my SOS. We'd been on the phone with a couple people. Airplane flies by a couple times. a second airplane was about to fly by. And what we did was they called me and they said, hey, we're talking to emergency services. We're trying to get a helicopter dispatched that can pick you up. Can you give us an updated location? Piece of cake. Go on your app, hit the button that says update location, and you can send that. Except I opened up my phone, or I turned on my phone. I go to the app, and guess what it says? Anybody?
Who's signal?
No, thankfully I had signal, but that's a good guess.
Needs update.
Updating. it's updating. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh crap. And of course, the hamster wheel is going as slow as possible. And I'm just sitting there going, this is so stupid. I have this awesome little engineered messaging device. And with my phone and this device, I can text. And if there's cell phone signal, it'll use the cell phone signal. And if it's not, it'll use the satellite signal. So it's genius, unless you didn't sync up and didn't pre-flight your electronic devices before you flew. So that was fun. And a stupid revelation. What I told them was, I'll hit SOS again for you. And they said, no problem. We can actually ping your device. And I was like, cool. If you could do that, that'd be great. So 2 pieces of kit that I had on me that were absolutely very useful in the moment that I completely misused. But I did get to get my SOS signal out. So thankful for that. Any questions so far? Okay.
Yeah,
I do see somebody.
Just asking a question about BLT. So you said 406 is useful. Was that ever utilized?
Well, I mean, it did. That would have gone on. The ELTU here is the 121.5. So it's that frequency and it's broadcasting as loud as crap. Plus the ELT, the device itself is putting that big siren out. 406 is also sending a signal out. But again, a 406 signal with zero, if you don't have a flight plan, people talk about or don't talk about doing a VFR flight plan, you got to remember the VFR flight plan is what will interact with the air traffic control system, so that if you don't reach your intended location within the time frame with a buffer that is loaded on your flight plan, no one's coming looking for you. Now, air traffic control can try to get somebody to come looking for you, but that's not the same thing. If you have flight following, they can report, hey, I think I have a downed airplane, but their primary job is not geolocation of a downed aircraft. So it's very significant to have a VFR flight plan, something in the system where people know who you are, what your intentions were, and what's going on, and update them. If anybody can actually still find those postage stamps on your VFR sectional, and go ahead and find flight service and just give them an update and go, hey, we saw some scenery down here in Utah, and we're actually going to veer, somewhere, southwest or something. Things like that. But at least if there's a flight plan out there, someone can come looking for you. Now, on that note, right, so having an accountability partner when you're flying is always also a good idea. So you can have someone who knows what your plan is for the day. And the fact that, if you saw our route, like, hey, we're going to do this, it's going to take 2 hours and 14 minutes. At least at 2 hours and 14 minutes, someone is going to actually call them for you. As opposed to nobody knowing that you went flying today, and then nobody's going to figure it out until like 3 days from now when you didn't feed your dog. I just noticed in chat, somebody asked, flaps rep, did you land with no flaps? We landed with flaps when we made the Mesa. So I guess we put them up. I don't remember doing that, but very possibly. And I'm going to say that's my recollection, because I do remember that, basically, we were not going to put flaps in until we knew we were going to make the Mesa. And as I'm talking through it, there's probably a good chance we never did. Once we made the Mesa, we were making the Mesa, no big deal. So I'll leave it at that. Possibly we didn't put them up because I don't remember putting them back up after we stopped. Good question. Okay, there's the track. Showed you this one. Showed you this one. There's our protagonist again. Arizona Public Safety to the rescue. They had shown up. They took about 2 hours to get up to our location, surveyed the location, surveyed the airplane, and they were there. Shout out. There's our 2 guys from Arizona Public Safety. So first responders, you gotta love them. This is my pilot, a guy named Sean. Oh, You know what? I owe him some pictures. So I'm glad I'm doing this talk because I would have forgot. He's my air medic rescue pilot who actually took me. And because of what we were doing, we actually ended up having somebody who's a air medevac from Page come out as well as the Arizona Public Safety. There's our airplane. So you can see we're not cheating again and lying. And there's my EMT crew for my medevac. And I'm ready to go home. So this is me saying bye to the airplane. Sorry. Anyway, at the end, that was the whole Mesa. Sorry. Yeah. Well, you saw that we saw the whole Mesa at the end there, kind of there. I don't want to go through it. Okay, one more last hero shot. I'm a little attached to my survival vest by this point. The folks are there. So there's Joe. Unfortunately, I didn't get the medevac crew. That would have been great to have all of us, but we're pretty stoked right now to be in civilization. And there is one more look at the landing. Now, here's the fun part. Talking to the air traffic controllers, I don't know if there's any in the audience or not, but MB, our controller, was pretty jazzed. And he was glad to hear the side of our story and the parts that we really appreciated that they did to help us, especially diverting folks to come find us. It turns out there were folks that were on our camp, but regardless, like having somebody coming our way based on the coordination, like 6 minutes from when the airplane started sputtering to when we landed. When we landed, within 13 minutes, there was an airplane that had flown over us to verify our location and our condition. So that was pretty cool. Also, by both, you go swipe back, by both the air medevacs and our Arizona Public Safety folks, they more than once told us, we're so happy that we're having this conversation because oftentimes these situations don't end up this way. So it was kind of a sobering moment all the way around. But there we go. So talking to our controller, he was motivated enough that he went out on Microsoft Flight Sim and he actually flew this mission. Went ahead and landed on the same Mesa. Go back. That's the airplane. That's Morgan landing on our Mesa. You can see he has wheel pants on, so I wouldn't use those, but it's all good. And that's our story. Any questions?
Those online, feel free to unmute and ask.
Yeah.
It's fixed. How'd you get the plane out of there?
Awesome. I would leave that out on purpose. So we reported this, and one of the things that happened after we landed at Page and the helicopter crew took us there was a sheriff. He was waiting for us, suitcase in his hand. I think it's for the field suitcase that sheriffs use to take notes and stuff like that, because he took out his clipboard and all that kind of stuff, and he had instructions to put us on a phone call with NTSB and FAA from the local FSDO. So we get on a phone call and we describe our story, and he's like, "So what's your damage again?" And so this is kind of for everybody, whether 8350 reporting requirements, or if you say emergency, like you're worried about having to do extra reporting requirements. We had this phone call and he's like, "So that's all your damage?" We're like, "Yeah." And no injuries? Well, Joe had a scratch left elbow. Huh. All right. He goes, "Well, I'm going to hand this one back over to you, Frank," or whatever his name was, from the FAA. So the NTSB dropped it immediately. FAA said, "All right, well, we're going to hand it and we're going to sign it back to your local FSDO back in Las Vegas." So that way, when the airplane gets recovered. So that's how the NTSB notification stuff happened in our case. So then we're waiting around, waiting for insurance. The FSDO airworthiness guy who was going to hopefully inspect our engine, find out what actually happened. He was just waiting whenever insurance does. So insurance took about 6 weeks. Pictures from us, statements from everybody. taking a look at, what the financial assessments are. If you guys didn't know, because there was not a prop strike, as far as we could tell, they weren't going to pay to fix the motor. I don't know how that works for insurance, but apparently that was the deal. So they get there 6 weeks after we landed. And in the 6 weeks after we landed, you guys saw the condition of the airplane. The wind flipped it over and they totaled it. So we're like, oh, that work. But hey, that's how it happens, I guess, sometimes. It ended up going down, I believe, to Phoenix or to some salvage yard. And I gave one of these talks to CFI boot camp a little over a month ago. And somebody had looked up that apparently the airplane finally got auctioned, probably for spare parts. I gave that information to our FSDO, and so I'm hoping he's going to get in touch with whoever took apart the motor, and we can finally figure out what actually happened. There you go. Oh, last question. How it gets off as opposed to how long it took. The way you would get an airplane like that off is a helicopter sling loading the airplane. You can Google that. A lot of times it's for airplanes that get stuck on like glaciers, is what you'll find on YouTube, but it shows you kind of how they do that. And a fun fact about that is the helicopter can't go faster than the stall speed of the airplane, because the airplane will start flying. And if it starts flying and then it stops flying, then it's going to be a dramatic weight shift for the helicopter. So they actually have to go kind of slow. I don't know. I found that to be a really intriguing fact on how they helicopter sling load airplanes. Anybody else?
How long did it take Garmin to get a hold of you on the response from your SOS?
Like 5 minutes. It was awesome.
I carry an inReach with me at all times, so I was always wondering.
Like on the way to the liquor store?
Yep, if I'm in my airplane.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's always with me now. Even if I'm just doing training with somebody, because I'm like, I'm gonna hit this button and someone's gonna come get me. But you got to remember, again, an important part of this story for everybody listening is just because you hit that SOS button doesn't mean they're immediately going to come looking for you. Getting found and stay found. Something I forgot to mention. The second person that came out to come find us was Jason Miller himself. So they were still at camp. They were wrapping up, grabbing the last of the stuff. And so they ended up coming our way. I tried to drop a pin with my cell phone and just send it to him. But apparently sharing my location, like for some reason at that point in time, it had drifted or something, or I don't know. I don't know if it had received varied signals, like when your phone pings off of different towers and sometimes it shows the wrong location for a little bit until it tightens up. So they ended up being like 4 or 5 miles south of us, but I heard them. And that's when I figured it out with my radio. I was like, duh, I know what radio frequency they're on. And I turned it on and I got them. I told them, hey, I hear you. Come on this way. The other thing that we were stupid about is all the campers are given a survival kit. It's a very basic survival kit, but it's kind of the starting points of what are the minimum things you'd want to have with you. And one of the items in the kit, you have a knife, you have a fishing kit, you have a first aid, beginnings of a first aid kit, some signaling, and then you have a signaling mirror. And we didn't think to bring out the signaling mirror until Jason came by. And as soon as we signaled him with the signaling mirror, it was like absolute dog balls. Like, we have verified your location without a question. I kind of kicked myself that we didn't do that earlier, but if you have a signaling mirror on you, it's like worth weight in gold in the daytime. Train with it, by the way, but that's pretty huge. So having that gear and doing that stuff, you really have to have a couple of different devices, maybe some night stuff, in order to try to make sure that you can signal and be found, get found and stay found.
You said it was 13 minutes till the first flyover. Was that due to the inReach or due to your ELT that you think?
No, that was actually air traffic control coordination.
Oh, okay.
So the Garmin inReach coordination was happening on the side. That I would contribute to why Arizona Public Safety helicopter made it to us, and it was 3 hours after we landed that we were able to get picked up. So that was pretty cool. We had water on us and all that kind of stuff, but I would not have wanted to stay the night for sure. The combination of they were taking off, and it was, I think we counted, it was 3 or within 5 minutes that they received the information from air traffic control that we have a downed airplane and they're going to come find us. And then it only took them about 15 minutes, or just under 15 minutes to come find our location. So all of that, I think I would attribute that part to having good, solid, and accurate coordination with air traffic control before we end up losing radio contact and landing. Another thing you can do, by the way, I touched on cell phones, is nowadays there is a satellite messaging feature on your phone. It includes geolocation and things like that. I'm not going to get into it now, but it'd be valuable to understand what that capability is before you go flying, if you're going to consider using it. The second thing that I would consider is that you can dial 911 on the way down to a off-airport landing, and the cell phone will ping, because there's an actual unit with Survival Recovery Center that their job is to get out there and use digital forensic evidence to confirm you made it to your location, you haven't made it to your location, or if, find about where you were. For instance, we've had talks with them, and if, they see your cell phone ping and maybe your ADSB, and the last thing they were able to find with extra ADSB that is not on the FISB broadcast is, you're going 6,000 feet per minute straight down. They're going to probably go back to SRC and report, we think this has been a fatality, and they'll get to you when they get to you, but it's not going to be as quick as a recovery. So that's an example, and that's straight from some talks we've had with survival recovery coordination people. But if they have your information, like if you could dial 911 on the way down, just leave it on. Who cares if anybody answers? But your cell phone's going to ping, and they should be able to find you, or at least use that information to help find you.
Are all insurance companies that slow? Or was that typical of all the insurance companies?
I don't know. I don't have much more experience in this one for how long it takes to recover an airplane from an off-airport landing. I don't know. I would hope that some insurance companies would have a little more urgency, but it was in a pretty desolate area, so.
I had one quick one about 8 hours. But it varies. It was up at Fountain Hill, so it was close enough to get to.
Yeah, I think when you're close to civilization, I've heard that, getting a truck out there and putting it on a tow truck and hauling it out is, less than a 24-hour thing, especially if you're, land on a highway and you're blocking traffic.
Those of you remember when we had Dan Bass give his talk about the carbon monoxide incident, and he landed in a field in Iowa or something. They recovered that airplane, he said, like the next day. He said it was pretty quick. But yeah, it's probably because you were so remote.
I think one comment I was going to make on this is that it is a very interesting story about all of the other things you did, but of course, the main thing and the most important thing here was you guys planned it well, and you flew it all the way to the crash, so to speak.
Yep.
And actually had a pretty, actually that plane wasn't in too bad a shape there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the really important thing, right? Is fly it all the way to the crash.
Yep. I
Fernando, do you
briefly
have a
mentioned.
picture how close you were to the edge there? You had one, I think, before.
That's probably good. How's that? Or you want a different one? Let's see. There you go. How about that? And the really interesting part here is this is a good place where you can see, we obviously started here and went this way. We landed about 500 feet in, which is probably around here, and estimated that it was about a 900-foot run is the landing. So in total, this was probably about close to 2,500 to 3,000 foot landing spot. But this right here is a shallow drop. It gets a little steeper right here, and it's back to shallow, but a little less shallow. But this is a like.
Are
Had
you
we
using
rolled?
your pointer? Because we don't see
Yeah,
that.
we don't see the.
Oh,
plan.
you can't see it? Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe describe where it
Oh,
is.
you know what?
relative to the plane.
Oh, there you go. There you go. How about
Oh,
that?
there you go.
Oh, good. I was using my mouse in the wrong spot. So this is a shallow spot right there. That's what I was looking at, is like I could see drop off, but it couldn't tell exactly how it was, but I knew this was bad drop off. We didn't want that. You know, so you can see a little bit of scalloping-ish or edge that drops off there. And I just didn't want us to get into where like one tire gets into this side, and then all of a sudden we start sliding or rolling that way. He was focused on, I'm right down the middle of the whole landing spot. So he was literally like going to land down the middle. If you look back to think back to the track log. So me barking at him actually kind of helped us both a little bit. And you can see we're actually even pointed slightly away. So it's kind of a crazy CRM moment.
After this crash, getting back in an airplane, did you have any hesitation mentally getting flying up that high again?
Not from fear, but for a number of reasons. I really didn't fly for a little bit. I up until about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I had a contracting job on base at Nellis Air Force Base. I helped coordinate flight testing. So I was pretty busy with work that fall last year. Trying to get an airplane, but I think I next flew like in January, which January Vegas, no big deal.
Yes.
You follow roads now?
I would highly recommend it. You know, people joke about that. For sure at night, I would recommend looking for something. But now, anytime I'm flying over what appears to be a completely desolate area, I try to minimize the risk of how long I'm over it. Unless I decide I'm going to go sightseeing, in which case, like, we're going here on purpose, you know, and am I mitigating all the possible risks of doing this? So it's kind of how I treat that now.
So how much do you think about altitude as your friend?
A lot.
Altitude.
all the time.
Okay, so in fire.
I think I used to, you know, I did a lot of low altitude flying in the military. And in GA, I kind of never really thought too much about it. Like I had my techniques, they were in the back of my brain. When we went to camps, I would teach them, but as outside of the camps, if I decided I would, you know, in Vegas, I could easily go 100 feet off the deck, you know, over the desert, and it's not a big deal. But it is a big deal. Like it's, you know, you trust your airplane so much, but there's always the chance of a power failure or power issue, or just something going wrong. And again, if you're going to do it, you just have to be prepared for the possibility that something can go wrong. And what am I going to do if it does? What am I going to do if it does now? What am I going to do if it does now? And just constantly being vigilant of that. I'm also so much more vigilant of knowing what my possible landing spots are and hanging on to them, even if they're behind me, until I found the next suitable one. I used to do that. The recency of that, along with a number of my emergency landing procedures, just wasn't there that day. And so practicing this stuff on a regular basis, give yourself a calendar. You know, if you haven't practiced emergency landings all the way to surface, and I don't mean, you know, go land in the field, but I mean, like if you can go 100 feet over dirt road, then take it all the way to surface so you can practice all of the things, to include the stuff like I would prop open my door now. I would prepare at this point to secure my engine, turn off the fuel, and do those things. Like practicing those things brings the recency in your brain to the fact that you might actually have a chance of doing them when something happens.
When you talk to the emergency responders, did they have your latitude and longitude?
They did come straight to us. So I'm pretty sure they did. I'm pretty sure that that coordination would have gone through. Well, there's two of them. The first coordination would have been through Garmin, and that was for the Arizona Public Safety. So the helicopter that came up from Kingman, actually, that's where the helicopter came from. So good little trip for them. They were finishing up some kind of other recovery or rescue or something, or whatever they were doing. So we took that's actually what had it make it took a little while. I'm also thankful for two helicopters because we got to bring our bags back with us. Otherwise, we had to leave all our stuff on the Mesa. The Jason and Eric Hope were in the other airplane, and they went to Page. And when they went and landed at Page, they got a hold of the medevac that's sitting there in the corner. I forget the name of the FEO there. And he just walked up. He's like, "Hey, my friends are over there. They're on a Mesa. Here's the coordinates," because they flew over us. Can you go help us get them? And they were like, "Sure." They just weren't doing anything at the time. And thankfully, we got 2 free helicopter flights because nobody was hurt. If you didn't know, if at least Arizona Public Safety would have charged us if there was any medical had to get rendered.
Yeah. Really unagreed.
Fernando, is there any indication of an impending engine problem at any time for the camp?
Before the camp?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, any other time that you were flying the airplane.
The best I could tell you, because it was one of our rental airplanes, but it was a reliable 182. As a fun fact, the day after this incident, which was a Sunday on the way home, the airplane was due for its annual. So that would have been, well, just fun fact. I'll leave it at that. We were having to put oil, like the airplane for a little while was notorious for having to almost put a half a quart or a quart of oil, like every time you were flying. If you haven't done any research on that, for an 540 or 520 or 0520, normally you're looking at every 3 to 5 hours. Maybe you're putting in a half a quart to a quart. I mean, there is spillage, and there's some oil that goes overboard and stuff, but it's not normally that much. And we put in a quart and a half before we left. So that was a little unusual, but it's something I can only say in hindsight.
Okay. And you said your first indication was hiccup in the oil pressure? And then
It was the indicator, the oil pressure indicator.
okay. And then
And it was a digital indicator. So we're like, do I trust this?
Yeah.
I will also tell you that I've had a number of folks that I've spoken to, and they're like, if you have a well-calibrated digital engine monitor, almost assuredly, if it's hiccuping on you, it's the engine. It's not the monitor.
How long from that indicator to the time it quit?
Let's see. We were in the climb to 8.5, leveled off. We were probably leveled off for a minute or so. You saw FlightAware was gracious enough to tell us we had a 23-minute flight total. So in the climb to getting to 10.5 was probably about 9 or 10 minutes. And then 6.5 to landing.
But when you checked the oil where you took off, 20 minutes later, you lost probably all of it.
So I caught the first part of that when we checked the oil before we took off.
And then 20 minutes later, you probably lost all your oil.
Yeah.
That's pretty big leap.
And you don't
Yeah.
know where
And it wasn't all over the bottom of the airplane.
somebody sabotaged it.
Yeah, I don't suppose you ever found out what was wrong.
No. I'm hoping, of course, right now he's, on a unpaid, but to be paid after the fact vacation. But the airworthiness inspector, I don't know that he's working right now or not, but I don't believe he is. And like I said, I gave him the information of the auction and who so that he could actually seek out who has the airplane now. And hopefully they've been taking it apart for parts, and we'll figure out what happened to the motor.
What
I
exactly?
do,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, what was the glitch? I mean, was it just temporarily dropped and then went back up again? What exactly did you see?
In the climb, the engine monitor sputtered, down to 0, and then would go back to green, and then it'd sputter again and then go back to green. So there was little moments of indications. And then we climbed to 10.5 and we were up there for, I don't know, less than a minute. And then it totally started sputtering and went to 0 and was like, that's all I'm going to give you, buddies.
Did you actually check the oil after you landed?
Yeah. Yep. 0 on the dipstick. I got pictures of that. I got pictures of the cowling, completely dry inside the cowling. You say oil sump?
No, it wasn't the oil pump. That's all I was thinking.
Not that I could tell. There's nothing sprayed over the inside of the cowling. If it went out the bottom, like near the cow flap, maybe. Because that oil that you saw on the front tire was the only oil that we really saw any indication of anywhere.
Next time you do this, take some straps with you. So you can keep it.
I'll keep that in mind. Oh, you know what's funny? I was miffed about this for a while. Like I bought a claw tie down kit. I was mad, and I was like, it cost me $145. And I didn't decide to use it. If I would have used it, then maybe, airplane wouldn't have flipped over and been fine. But we were leaving the airplane. I didn't think at all about tying it down.
So you're gonna get your straps back.
I don't think so. I suppose whoever auctioned it or bought it in auction has a set of claw tie down system.
First had you tied it down, then you'd had to pay to get it off the mesa, wouldn't you?
If I would have tied it down,
Yeah, if you tied it down, there was no more damage to the airplane, then you'd had to pay to get it off the mesa, wouldn't you?
Insurance.
no insurance was gonna. Yeah, and it wasn't my airplane. It was a rental airplane from the flying club.
I thought you said insurance wasn't gonna pay anything, because it wasn't damaged.
Fix the engine.
No, yeah, what and I don't know the paperwork. I was told that a couple people were like, "What a bummer! Like you didn't have a prop strike. If you don't get a prop strike, they don't fix your engine because then they consider it just maintenance. If you get a prop strike, then they'll fix it as part of the damage of the off airport landing." That's what was explained to me. I'm like, I would have a hammer to get that prop if I needed to.
Anyone else online or here in the room?
Okay, well, let's thank our speaker, I think.
Yes.
Thank you.
Appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Coming together and wanting to be safer is always a good thing.
So there's 25 of us here, and looks like about it's gone between 10 and 15 or so online.
Cool.
If I hit all the right buttons, this is recorded, and I'll put it up to the club YouTube page at some point, and I'll send an email to everybody with that link, as well as Mr. Molina's contact info if you want to reach out to him.
Awesome.
Like he did say, he gave this to CFI boot camp, so if you're members of that, you can watch. I'm sure that one was recorded. Plus, I don't know, you talked for like a couple hours afterwards answering questions.
That was a much bigger group. Yeah, lots of questions.
Yeah, that was 500 people. And then, are you invited back to Oshkosh?
As of right now, I don't know.
Okay,
But as of right now, I haven't had an invite, so we'll see.
okay.
It'd be cool.
I don't know. So what did this happen again?
This happened on September 29th of 2024.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, Mr. Molina, thank you so much for spending the evening with us.
Yeah.
Fernando's from Las Vegas, in case anybody wants to know. And also include information of those camps that he does. So if you have the wherewithal and want to do something like that, it sounds like a real blast. All right, thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect this here. If you're online, thank you for attending. And those of you that are here in person, if you want to stick around for Dr. Steinmetz's IMC presentation, please do so. I'll put the sheet out here in a second.
Awesome. Thanks again, everybody. Be safe.
8 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.